Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we're reading from Canto 3, Status Quo. The chapter is called Lord Kapila's Instructions on the Movements of the Living Entities. So I'll read verses 1 through 4. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Karmana Daiva Netrena Jantur Deho Papataye Striya Pravista Udaram Pumso Breta Kanashraya. Word for word. Shri Bhagavan Vacha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Karmana by the result of work, Daiva Netrena, under the supervision of the Lord, Jantu, the living entity, Deha, a body, Upataye, for obtaining, Striya, of a woman, Pravista, enters, Udaram, the womb, Pumsa, of a man, Reta, of semen, Kana, particle, Ashraya, dwelling in. Translation. The personality of Godhead said, under the supervision of the Supreme Lord, and according to the result of his work, the living entity, the soul, is made to enter into the womb of a woman through the particle of male semen to assume a particular type of body. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. As stated in the last chapter, after suffering different kinds of hellish conditions, a man comes again to the human form of body. The same topic is continued in this chapter. In order to give a particular type of human form to a person who has already suffered hellish life, the soul is transferred to the semen of a man who is just suitable to become his father. During sexual intercourse, the soul is transferred through the semen of the father into the woman's womb, and in order to produce a particular type of body. This process is applicable to all embodied living entities, but it is specially mentioned for the man who was transferred to the Anda Tamishra hell. After suffering there, when he who has had many types of hellish bodies, like those of dogs and hogs, is to come again to the human form, he's given the chance to take his birth in the same type of body from which he degraded himself to hell. Everything is done by the supervision of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Material nature supplies the body, but it does so under the direction of the Supersoul. It is said in the Gita that a living entity is wandering in this material world on a chariot made by material nature. The Supreme Lord as Supersoul is always present with the individual soul. He directs material nature to supply a particular type of body to the individual soul according to the result of his work, and the material nature supplies it. Here, one word, Reta Kanashraya, is very significant because it indicates that it is not the semen of the man that creates life within the womb of a woman. Rather, the living entity, the soul, takes shelter in a particle of semen and is then pushed into the womb of a woman. Then the body develops. There is no possibility of creating a living entity without the presence of the soul simply by sexual intercourse. The materialistic theory that there is no soul and the child is born simply by material combination of the sperm and ovum is not very feasible. It is unacceptable. Next verse. I'll read yeah, next verse. Kalalam tva ekaratrena pancharatrena budbudam dasahena tu karkandu peshi andam vatataparam. Translation. On the first night, the sperm and the ovum mix. On the fifth night, the mixture ferments into a bubble. On the 10th night, it develops into form like a plum. And after that, it gradually turns into a lump of flesh or an egg, as the case may be. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The body of the soul develops in four different ways according to its different sources. One kind of body, that of the trees and plants, sprouts from the earth. The second kind of body grows from perspiration, as with flies, germs, and bugs. The third kind of body develops from eggs, and the fourth develops from an embryo. This verse indicates that after emulsification of the ovum and sperm, the body gradually develops into either a lump of flesh or into an egg, as the case might be. In the case of birds, it develops into an egg. In the case of animals and human beings, it develops into a lump of flesh. Next verse. Translation. In the course of a month, a head is formed, and at the end of 2 months, the hands, feet, and other limbs take shape. By the end of 3 months, the nails, fingers, toes, body, hair, both skin appear, as do the organ of generation and other apertures in body, namely the eyes, nostrils, ears, mouth, and anus. Next verse. Within 4 months from the date of conception, the seven essential ingredients of body, namely child, blood, flesh, fat, bone, marrow, and semen, come into existence. At the end of 5 months, hunger and thirst make themselves felt, and at the end of 6 months, the fetus, enclosed by amnion, begins to move on the right side of the abdomen. Purport. When the body of the child is completely formed at the end of 6 months, the child, if he is male, begins to move on the right side, and if female, he tries to move on the left side. Okay, so I think we just had a quick biology lesson in how the human body is formed. Um, it's amazing that in such excuse me, in such detail, it's described how it's described in such detail how this process takes place in the Bhagavatam, which is written so many years ago. And two sort of things amaze me. One is like the fact this process can even happen, the fact that Krishna has made this entire process and it works like this. We take it for granted how this process actually happens, but it's amazing how Krishna has planned this entire process and how human life comes to earth. And secondly, the other part that is stressed in these verses is the rarity of the human life. So there's a couple key points that are made in these verses. One is that in order to get a particular type of human life to a person, they have already suffered a hellish life. So they've perhaps been through multiple lives of hellish life or animal life. And so in this section, there's this one word, Reta Kanashraya. It's very significant because it indicates that it's not the semen of a man that creates the life within the womb of woman. Rather, the living entity or the soul takes the shelter of a particle of semen and then is pushed to the womb of a woman. So it's sorry, I'm gonna get a tissue. 1 second. Sorry. Yeah. So it's making this point that uh, it's like the soul is actually taking shelter of the semen, and then the soul is transferred to the mother's womb, and that is how the soul plays a role in here. It's not that this whole process is happening without the soul. It's right then and there. It's a very important point uh, that he makes in this verse. And uh, when the soul is transferred to the mother's womb, it's transferred to produce a very particular type of body. Therefore, so this whole theory, this whole materialistic theory that there's no soul and that a child is born simply by like these material interactions of sperm and ovum, that's not true. He's clarifying that part in the purport. And then Prabhupada also makes the point that this process is applicable to everyone, but it's specially mentioned for the man who's transferred, um, from this andata mishra hell, meaning, after suffering in that hell, when he's had many types of hellish bodies, like a dog, like the body of a dog and a hog, he has come to take human form again, and he's given the chance to take his birth in the same type of body which he degraded himself to hell. And so the material nature supplies the body, but it all happens under the direction of the super soul. Because, so far we've just talked about the individual soul in this picture, but also the super soul is there. And so the super soul is always present with the individual soul. And so therefore, the Supreme Lord directs material nature to supply a very particular type of body to the individual soul. And then the material nature supplies it, and the super soul then joins, in this process that's happening. So again, like when I kept reading this, like, it's like only someone like Krishna can think and design something like this. And this kind of biology was, like I said, stated so many years ago. It's not that something that modern science came up with recently. And so it's quite amazing, and it's inconceivable that only Krishna can do something like this. That was like my first form of appreciation when I was reading this. But one thing that Prabhupada stresses on is that this is rare. This whole human form that uh, it's Prabhupada's making the point that you're only getting this chance after suffering um, so many forms of hellish life. And so I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about this concept of a rare human form of life, because again, we think everyone just gets a human form of life. You just take birth and life moves on. But there's actually so much that has happened in the past to get to this human form of life, and why we should be taking so much, um, we should be taking this with such rarity. It's not a common thing. And so wanted to share a few verses that explain why this rare human form of life is so important. The first verse is from uh, Canto 11, Chapter 9, verse 29. And the translation is, I won't read the full verse. The translation is, after many, many births and deaths, one achieves the rare human form of life, which, although temporary, affords one the opportunity to attain the highest perfection. Thus, a sober human being should quickly endeavor for the ultimate perfection of life, as long as his body, which is always subject to death, has not fallen down and died. After all, sense gratification is available even in the most abominable species of life, whereas Krishna consciousness is possible only for a human being. So in this other verse, again, it's stressing the importance of human life, and a few points that are made is, again, this point is like stressed so much that we've obtained this human body, which is extremely difficult to obtain. The verse has this word sudurlabham, that like the soul actually goes through 9 lakh different aquatic categories, or then it goes through different categories of a tree. It goes through different categories of insects, birds, whatever, different forms of the animal chain, and then you know different categories of humans, and then finally we get this form of human life. It's gone through so many different levels, and that's when you get this human body. That's what this first part of the this verse is being talked about. And we're called Manushas, meaning we're descendants of Manu. And this human body gives us the opportunity to do certain things that other forms of life you're not able to do. So only humans can actually chant with their tongue, right? We have the ability to remember and hear the names of Vishnu. And it gives not it gives meaning to all these things, whereas an animal or other forms of life, you're not able to do these things really well. And so yeah, it's stressing on the importance of these things. Then it talks about, but the one problem with human life or any life is that it's temporary, it's not eternal. And so in this verse is stating that an intelligent person should have dhira and remain focused so we can achieve the ultimate benefit, which is the darshan of Krishna. And again, we should do it in this human form of life. Uh, Verse talks about, instead of visha, instead of eating food or gossiping or sleeping too much, it's found, which these things are found in every species of life. It's not just human life. Um, we can focus on making the most out of this human life. And so, one analogy that Prabhupada gives here is, again, we have been given this human body to navigate ourselves back to Krishna. Like we're supposed to use this body to navigate to go back to Vaikuntha. But if we're only using this body for what animals do, right, which is eating, or sleeping, friendships, or but you may not make the progress to go back to Vaikuntha. And so the analogy Prabhupada gives is that, if you're a pilot that's driving the airplane, and you're on the runway and you're just driving the airplane, meaning you're not flying, you're just driving the airplane on the runway, then the airplane is not achieving its purpose. You're just stuck. You're just stuck on the runway. Um, and therefore then the soul loses the body and it becomes an animal of the next life. And so that's what these are the few things that this verse is stressing. And similarly, Prahlad Maharaj, famously says also, Prahlad Maharaj makes this point: one who's sufficiently intelligent should use, this is the translation I'm reading of what he says. Prahlad Maharaj says, one who's sufficiently intelligent should use the human life or human form of body from the very beginning of life. In other words, from the tender age of childhood, to practice the activities of devotional service, giving up all other engagements. The human body is most rarely achieved, and although temporary, like other bodies, it is meaningful because in human life, one can perform devotional service. Even a slight amount of sincere devotional service can give one complete perfection. Um, so, Prahlad Maharaj was someone that was um, very big on this from since day one. He always stressed on this point of the importance of turning to Krishna consciousness from a very young age. And so, the purport, Prabhupada talks about, or even Prahlad Maharaj talks about, why the brahmachari system was introduced as early as from 5 years old. Um, right in the olden days, the kids would be born and they would go to live with their guru, and the whole idea was to introduce them into Krishna consciousness as young as possible, because again, this point of the fact that human life is rare is is again emphasized over and over again. It says health issues might come up, life is sort of unpredictable, right? And so uh, it mentions the importance of picking up this from an early age. Um, and Prahlad Maharaj states in that verse that the devotees are anxious to give out devotional service. It's our he's almost saying that in all schools, colleges, universities, we should be taught to hear about the supreme personality of Godhead. Um, and then another verse that I wanted to share is from Canto 2. Talks about both by rising and by setting, the sun decreases the duration of life for everyone, except one who utilizes the time by discussing topics of the all good personality of Godhead. And this is an interesting verse. So, um, this verse is saying is that actually, as every moment, every day passes, uh, we're getting closer and closer to death. Um, so it's sort of painting this very real picture of where life is going as each moment and as each day passes. Um, but again, if you're learning about Krishna consciousness, if we're speaking about how Krishna can take us back to Godhead, then life sort of even goes faster. So actually, in one sense, you can look at this in two ways. As the rising and sunsetting of the sun, one way to look at it is that it's bringing us closer to death. The other way you can look at it is that it's bringing us closer to Krishna. And so, for a person that may not be chanting or aspiring for Krishna, maybe it's bringing them closer to death. For a person who's focused on Krishna, it's bringing them closer to Vaikuntha. And at the time of death, Krishna personally comes and takes us to Vaikuntha, and so time is constantly passing, uh, and our lives are being shortened, is what this verse is saying. So unless we use our time in a very spiritually productive way, it's considered loss of time as the sun goes up and down. Again, this is all to say how rare and important the human life is, and how important it is to engage in devotional service. Prabhupada says even if a single moment is used in hearing about the Lord, it can make a very meaningful impact and protects protects us from our time getting robbed as the sun goes up and down. So I think, yeah, when I was reading these verses, it really reminded me and that we can't take this for granted. The fact that we're in a human form, it's rare. You achieve it after going through so many hellish stages, after having so many different animal lives, and then you finally achieve this human form of life. And we forget that often. So I really appreciated that part when I was reading these section of verses. And the other part that I wanted to or speak a little bit about is, you know, we often um, we often wonder, like, how can we see Krishna in our lives? How can we really see him or feel his presence? And I think this whole process of how a human form life takes place, what we just read in those verses in the beginning of this call, how the sperm comes, how the living entity takes shelter of the sperm and then goes to the to the mother's womb, and then what happens in each month after that is only something that Krishna can do. Even a secular person who's not a devotee can appreciate the magic or the process that Krishna creates in this process. And at that point, then you think this is only something God or Krishna can do. It's his inconceivable energy that can. that can do this, and um, it makes you appreciate Krishna's inconceivable energy. And when you think of that topic, like, how can Krishna have inconceivable energy? This is just one aspect. This whole process of this whole process of birth. If you just look at how all the different planets are distributed in the universe, um, and how, each planet has its own thing. There's so many different aspects in our life where Krishna's inconceivable energy is driving this world. Like the solar system is one. Um, where each planet has its own climatic influences, its own inhabitants. Each planet has its own laws that we're not aware of. And so these common things that we take for granted that scientists are publishing are actually no, these are something that Krishna has designed. And so I and this personally, relates to me so much is because at least when we were having our first daughter, it just uh, yeah, made me realize like this is Krishna. This is what only he can do. This whole aspect. And another pastime that reminds me of Krishna's inconceivable energy is the whole pastime of Bhishma. Bhishma is passing away. This is again only his inconceivable energy that can do this. The fact that Bhishma was lying in a bed of arrows, you tell any normal person that, their reaction is, "Huh? What does that mean?" And this whole, when Bhishma Dev had decided to fight on the side of Duryodhana, which was surprising to find out about. So this whole pastime was very inconceivable in nature and how Krishna had planned it. Duryodhana was extremely wicked, um, but he was an excellent CEO of how he planned that whole war, right? He was an excellent organizer, manager, and he recruited these different generals to be on his side. Bhishma was one of them that was on Duryodhana's side. And Duryodhana had taken over the kingdom from his father, and he did everything that he could to bring people on his side. Bhishma knew that Duryodhana was wicked, but he knew that Yudhishthira was the most qualified person. He knew that there was a plot to bury the Pandavas alive in the House of Black, uh, and he knew that's how Duryodhana was thinking. Bhishma even saw the cheating match. He knew the Pandavas would lose. He Bhishma saw how Draupadi was stripped from her sari, and but externally Bhishma was on Duryodhana's army because he thought maybe Duryodhana might financially maintain him. But of course, more importantly, Bhishma knew the plan of the Lord. He knew that he would lose and die, and even though Bhishma had the ability to single-handedly. Sorry, the second alarm is going off. Okay, Bhishma had the ability to destroy the Pandavas himself one-handedly. He could have. Bhishma had the ability to destroy the Pandava army entirely himself. Um, and Bhishma he was shooting the arrows to Pandavas until uh, the Pandavas realized that they have to ask Krishna, how do we defeat Bhishma Dev? So Pandavas went to, and then Krishna said, you have to ask Bhishma. You have to go ask Bhishma how he can be defeated. So then Pandavas went to Bhishma, and Bhishma told them exactly how they can kill him. And the reality was that Bhishma was, sick of this material world, and he wanted to go home. He wanted to die. He wanted to be defeated in a certain way. And so, that whole pastime happens where the Shikhandi is brought in front of Bhishma, and then Arjuna shoots the arrows at Bhishma. And Bhishma lies down and he stays alive on the bed of arrows. It's not that he passes right away. He stays alive over multiple days, and he's watching the war happen. How is that conceivable? It's unconceivable that this is happening. Um, the way Bhishma tells him how he can be killed, the fact that he shot so many arrows, he's lying in a bed of arrows. This is all inconceivable of how this has been happening. And then, you know, Bhishma takes his time in passing away. He's watching the war, he's hearing and seeing Krishna. And Krishna knew that Bhishma was waiting for Bhishma to get the darshan of Krishna. And so that's then only would Bhishma pass away. And the analogy here is that Bhishma was fine suffering the material world on that bed of arrows until Krishna shows up and sees him. And that's the similar process that we have to think about, in this material world. How can we not necessarily lie on this bed of arrows, so to speak, but how can we take the suffering, but really wait for Krishna so we can go back to him? Um, so I think those are the two sort of main areas that I wanted to talk about. One is the rarity of human form of life and how inconceivable Krishna's presence is in our lives. And again, we take it for granted. But just thinking about how these basic things that we think these are basic, but they're actually being planned by Krishna gives us appreciation to think of Krishna always. Yeah, I'll pause here to see if there's any comments from devotees, or if there's anything to add.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. When I read this section, it's always mind blowing how the technology is kind of given, right? I mean, even for people who doesn't believe God and all, I mean, it is kind of I mean, lot of details, right? That is given here. I mean, but when people read with so-called scientific background, I mean, I don't know. I mean, they give different kind of. I don't know what they give, what they say about this. I mean, how it was given when the technology was not as matured as it is now, right? The ultrasound and all, right? To see what month, what weeks of carrying the baby. I mean, the body takes different how the body gets formed, right? I mean, because generally when we see some um, natural things happen and people give different kinds of explanation, right? Yeah, this is because of this as per the science. But when something like this is given in the scriptures, which are like time, I mean, there's no time to it, right? I mean, whatever time that they can say, even 5,000 or 10,000, whatever years, 3,000. So still, it is the technology was not as it is now. So I don't know what the science say, because I was hearing yesterday one thing, and there was some kind of, I mean, I saw some video. So there is a cyclone recently in South India, and the it was supposed to come to one place, and the people in that area believe that there is a Narsinga Swami temple. It never hit comes across that Dhwajastambha. And every time they were saying, I mean, I think 3 4 times it happened last 15 20 30 years. But it was always supposed to hit there, but was never coming there. It was just come to there and then crosses takes a different direction little bit. So I mean, people are giving, some scientists are saying that, it is because of the sea shape is differently like this, right? So that they know even before the cyclone came there also, right? That time also they should have said, yeah, because of the sea shape it won't come this way. Right? But when it doesn't hit, they give some scientific reason. I was just thinking, when these kind of details are given in scriptures, how the modern science explains, right? So they try to
Yeah,
explain it in some perspective. So even the architecture of the temples that we see, right? Some of those temples, I mean, they're so huge. When these cranes and all were not there,
yeah,
how they
yeah,
built. So
yeah,
it is mind blowing. I mean, yeah, primarily what I was trying to say. I mean, when we see these things, I mean, it gives a lot of. I mean, it's not just the what you see is the what is right. But yeah, there are things that people know without even having this kind of technological advancement, right? So
Yeah, it's
thank you.
yeah, it's and we take it for granted, and it's not. It's something that Krishna designed himself. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, devotees. If nothing else, have a great Krishna conscious day ahead. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.